Raj. Nice to see you on another episode of the Goodman Podcast. You're doing well?
I'm doing well indeed, Megan. Good to be back on. Yes, I'm good. How are you?
Yes, can't complain. Uh, Doing well, business is going well, using a lot of AI, so life is good. And yeah, like I say, can't complain.
Yeah, well, I wonder if life is good because you're using AI, or is life just good and AI is helping you? But either way, I'm glad you're using a lot of AI. It makes life easier. It's here to help us out.
Yeah,
So,
it's definitely. I was chatting to a lawyer earlier this week about intellectual property and that kind of thing regarding AI, and he's like, people are stressing too much in terms of content creation. AI is a tool, and as long as you're not using that tool to do nefarious things, AI, we should be embracing it. So yeah, that's what I'm doing, embracing it, and that's obviously what we're kind of getting our listeners to do as well, is to embrace AI. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about storytelling and how we can use AI to do that. And well, storytelling in the kind of last few years has become a big deal in content marketing specifically. And so already it is storytelling itself is an indispensable tool. But we need to be able to elevate that storytelling to set us apart in from the competition, using data and AI. So maybe before we get to the AI bit, do you want to maybe kick us off and kind of explain what storytelling is in the business world, and how it works in the context of content marketing for your business?
yeah, of course, absolutely, Megan. So, it's interesting because we talk about business, we talk about B2B, we talk about B2C, and we kind of forget actually it's all about what I call P2P, person to person. Like at the end of the
Yeah.
day, what is actually happening is I'm making decisions based on people and how they feel emotionally. And if we don't think about that as a actual human process, we will not actually meet our goals or reach to where you want to go as a business or as individuals selling as well. So that's the
Mhm.
first fundamental important part. Coming to storytelling, which is, I believe, is a very fundamental human need. It is something which has been going on for centuries. As long as humans existed, as long as they could communicate, they've been telling stories. And I know this because we look at most religious texts, which is the oldest available text, for example, they all are around stories. You know, in every religion we talk about kingdoms or eras, it's always a story. There was somebody who did something and then this happened, this whole story around it. So storytelling and hearing stories is a fundamental nature, and when you are looking at the emotional needs of a person or people in a business, that's when magic happens. And so we talk about businesses telling stories, we feel, we see, and there's evidence to support that people respond better to stories being told to them as opposed to, well, this is service A, product A, buy it because it can help you. When you tell a story around it, they resonate with it better and they really want to then buy into the story. Sometimes story sells better than the actual offering or the benefit of the actual product or service. You know, how many times have you bought something because you love the story or the person behind it or the team behind it or how the product was actually built, for example? So that's the emotional need I feel serves the human beings behind the company and the buyers themselves.
And I think stories are just so easy to remember as well. It's instead of, like you say, selling a product, you're selling a narrative almost. And I remember years ago, I saw an advert for Procter and Gamble, P&G, and they sell household products like toilet paper and washing powder and that kind of thing. And this story that I saw in the advert kind of stuck with me, and it had kind of tied in with the Rio Olympics and about how moms helped their young children become Olympic athletes, and it's like a real tearjerker. And Well, I mean, like I say, it's years later and I'm still thinking about the storyline. So, I mean, storytelling is just really so powerful. People remember those narratives, especially if it resonates with them.
Absolutely. In fact, if you look at all the examples of, for example, Tom's shoes or Water Aid, where they kind of, if you buy the shoe or the water, they will donate to a charity with something similar, for example. That itself is a story as well. It's very powerful because, again, the emotional need to be told a story and then react to it is very, very important for human beings. So I think storytelling is a very important part of what we kind of consume. But businesses saying a story tie in with that need, and as you mentioned earlier, about remembering the story as well.
Yeah, yeah. Now, in terms of storylines and narratives and triggering emotions to create desire, I mean, at the end of the day, storytelling is part of marketing. We're speaking about business here. Now that we kind of understand the significance of storytelling, maybe you could guide us, how to use this art form to create compelling content. What are the essential components that we're looking for?
Absolutely, and in fact, I'd love to get your thoughts on this as well, Megan, as a content creator yourself as well.
Mm,
I feel every human being has a different way to tell a story. But fundamentally, there's a requirement to have something compelling there as a narrative which captures the audience. The first step for me telling a good story is to understand who the story is for, the audience itself. Really
mm,
understand how will we be able to tell them a story which they understand and can respond or comprehend, for example. The first thing for me is the audience itself. Number two is to be so simple that anybody can understand. Many a times people will tell stories which are so complicated, using jargons which people don't understand. Well, how will they remember the story? Right? So that is super important. Number three is having different parts. So there are very different ways you can construct a story. You can have the typical sort of this, it was so and so, something dramatic happened in their life, and then they overcome that challenge, and then they lived happily ever after. So there's a narrative there which they're following. There are some patterns there which they follow, and there are multiple patterns in the market today you can follow. But having that pattern is, I think, super important. I think they call it the hero story, for example, where there's a hero which
mm,
comes and saves the day, for example. That's number three. Number four is having all the parts such that it triggers an emotion for the end user. So it's really important that we understand that this is a story to create an emotion amongst the audience members. Because if it doesn't, then what's the point of a story in the first place? And number
mm,
five, adding bits to make it more memorable. One of the things I often do is to kind of have names for characters who are in it, because when we add a name, a Bob, a Tom, a Megan, a Raj, it all actually helps to make it more memorable and actually have kind of resonate with the people. Finally, telling the story in various forms. I feel people to understand that we all are different people, that we all understand things in different ways. So if someone prefers voice, there's a podcast for them. Someone prefers video, there's a YouTube video for them. Someone would like to read, has it in blog format or maybe even like e-paper format. So I feel different forms is super important as well. So these are my bits which I use to kind of construct a good story. And when I look at stories being told to me, I look at these things as well. I'd love to hear, Megan,
yeah.
how do you think of a story when it's being told to you?
Well, pretty much like you say, the that kind of hero narrative. I like to identify with the main character in the story, and I think from a content marketing perspective, that hero needs to be the audience member that's consuming that content. I mean, I find stories interesting in general, but when I can really relate on a personal level to the person in that story, I buy in a lot more because I can identify and in context of like business storytelling, you're telling the story essentially of a person like me who has a problem and they need to overcome it. And you throw the product or the service in, and you're essentially painting a vision of what that person's life can be if they use your product or service. So, yeah, I mean, it's addressing pain points, it's addressing challenges, showing, like I say, painting a vision of the future, and it's done in a way that I can relate to that main character. So yeah, basically all of your points, that you've mentioned. I quite like. I don't know if you've read the book by, I think it's Donald Miller, Building a Story Brand, and he kind of goes through that very structured. This is how you do it, and this is what you shouldn't do. And I think that a lot of mistakes that people make in brand storytelling is making themselves as the business the center of the story, and that's never going to really resonate with an audience, because no one really cares about your business. They care about themselves, and the only reason they're going to care about your business is if you're helping them overcome a challenge or address a pain point in some way.
Yeah, completely agree with you. I think that's a good point you mentioned there. I think also to kind of add to that, a lot of times when people think about themselves or their audiences, they feel that it's actually okay because our audience are so tech savvy potentially, or they really understand the tech subject matter, that we can go and throw at them tech jargons to tell the
Mm.
story. Whereas often I realize that with most companies, especially in B2B, the storytelling has to be so simple, especially because the audiences are varied. You might be targeting tech companies and technologists within the company, but typically you'll have a CFO or a CEO which has no idea about the tech part of it. They are great with numbers and sell strategy really well. They are there for a function, which is finance or strategy for business. So for them, technology makes a lot of sense. They don't understand the terminology. So keeping it simple, as you mentioned earlier, is so important for storytellers and marketeers in these businesses.
Yeah, yeah. Now, moving on to the AI side, I mean, we've got data has kind of become ubiquitous in business, and especially big data. And data kind of ties in with AI. So, how can we leverage big data and AI tools to kind of enhance our storytelling and create those emotional narratives that get people to buy into our business?
Well, having data, especially around the customers, the audiences, is super important because that tells us, well, what is the consumption, what's the need, what is the desire, what part of the story might be more interesting for them, for example. So I feel that is really, really helpful to have. But also in storytelling, especially with more tech savvy or perhaps just business savvy audiences, they like facts. They really like those numbers. And how
Mm.
can we tell those numbers without knowing what they are for ourselves? So incorporating those numbers within them in a simplified manner is actually very helpful. So for example, if a trend is at the moment, for example, the trend is that this is growing dramatically. If you use, if the data shows that this is actually growing exponentially, using the word exponentially actually is gives them a visual representation of the growth of a particular offering, for instance. Also, I feel for many stories, keeping it simple is really important. I personally like to keep maximum 3 to 5 points within one narrative. So anything beyond 5 points is just way too much in a narrative for anything we're trying to tell. Now, how do you prioritize? Say you're offering 20 different products, 20 different services. How do you prioritize these different things? And I feel a big part of that, in my experience, is based on knowing what is the highest selling or asked for or in demand, and then prioritizing that in the story we tell as well. I feel that gives the opportunity to tell the story in the right way, prioritizing based on numbers and AI. Now,
Yeah,
the beauty of all of this is that if we are able to put this all together in an easy to understand format and we upload all this information to the AI tool itself, whether it is ChatGPT, OpenAI, using Pi, you're using Claude, whatever you might be using, it can actually help you prioritize that as well. It can give you some pointers on looking at what could be the top of the chart, or the most important part of the narrative. So AI can help you achieve that. I think that's why we can use AI more effectively, to kind of help it prioritize the different points. Then the human being has to say, well, that makes sense, that doesn't make sense. Let's look at prioritize this based on our experience as well. So at the end of the day, with custom code, custom data, the human being involved has to be savvy enough to understand, well, if the AI recommendations make sense. Typically, it does a very good job at heavy lifting for us. That's super useful.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, it all comes down to, don't ask your AI to write the story for you. It's an intelligence tool. Take the data, give me analyze this data, give me the output, tell me what's the most important, and that's where you can start building the story from a human level.
I completely agree with you. You hit the nail on its head. It's intelligence tool. It can help you to achieve that. It's not a database. It can't keep track of all the stuff, and it should not be used as a database anyway. But when we use AI as intelligence tool, it can help prioritize those things, and that can be used in the storytelling, which kind of go as a business.
Yeah. So, as we kind of wrapping up this conversation, the 60-second takeaway from storytelling to using AI, what would you recommend the listeners do as they walk away from this podcast, or press pause before they go on to our next episode, obviously? What can they implement immediately to enhance their storytelling using AI?
Yeah, absolutely. So the most important part we discussed today was that fundamentally human beings love storytelling. They understand, they comprehend, and remember better if we tell things as stories. The storytelling shouldn't be complicated. It should actually follow a process, a procedure, a format. And there are multiple formats available which we can use. Storytelling can be enhanced by using data which is available out there on the customer, the audience, the services we offer, which was growing, for example, incorporating those into our stories, maybe using AI to help us prioritize the service or product works better, and then having more emphasis on that can actually enhance a story. But the famous yes, keep it simple, stupid is so important for us. Let's keep it simple for our audiences, for ourselves. And if there's one test I would give someone to kind of follow is called the mom test, which is your mom cannot understand it, nobody else can. So just keep a story simple and make it so easy that anybody, like your mom, can understand any story you tell, whether it's for tech people, business people, or anybody else in the market.
Yeah. Awesome. I call that my grand test. If my grand could understand it, then you've done well. But yeah, great advice. Thanks, Raj. Yeah, I think that's probably a great place to leave it for now. And again, thank you for taking the time to chat to us about this. And yeah, until next time, keep crafting, keep innovating, and let's keep telling some really unique stories.
Hey,